To start with this project, we decided the best thing to do was to go ahead and build the furnace. The furnace is basically just a metal shell with plaster and sand working as an insulating barrier. And in this clip, you can see me trying unsuccessfully to pour the sand for the first furnace that we built.
I did it. Alright, so here's some water.
Take these a little bit slower too. Just
Once mixed, this plaster and sand mixture would become hard quite quickly, so we had to work fast here and make sure that everything was in place before we let this cure.
This is a better idea.
In order to make the hole in the furnace in which the crucible will sit, we decided to take an empty plastic bucket and use it to mold the plaster and sand mix around it. We used sand and a heavy rock to weigh this down into that dense mix.
wow.
After the insulating mix cured, we had to pull the empty plastic bucket out of the mix in order to create the negative space. Unfortunately for us, shortly after finishing our mini furnace, we decided that it was too small to fit any reasonable quantity of fuel inside of it. So we had to make a bigger one. And for this, we just used the same insulating mixture that we used before, and we actually just used the mini furnace that we made to start with in order to make that negative space in the mold.
Alright, I guess.
Email. No.
That bucket right there? Inside? As long as it's not gonna.
It's like I'm just about to leave.
That went my eye.
You're gonna go blind?
Yeah, actually, that's big enough.
This is all we got. So
That's all we got. So,
yeah, so we have to do this.
so yeah.
Ain't no ifs, ands, buts about it.
I might as well hire y'all.
That's really.
Yeah.
We've got Brian, Oscar, Noel, and some of this whatever.
We tried to remove the steel pail as to reveal the negative space in our furnace in the same exact way as we did the bucket before, but it turns out that this steel pail was not coming out no matter how much we kicked it or pulled on it.
Bit the handle.
Hell no. Hell no.
So I decided the best thing to do if we couldn't pull the pail out would be just to drill the insulation out of the pail in order to give us room for the fuel for the furnace.
This is dangerous.
Here we decided to take a little break from the messy furnace building, and we used that time to build the frames for the sand casting molds. In the next step of this process, once the insulating mix cured, we drilled a hole through the side of the furnace and inserted a steel pipe as to allow for airflow.
Actually,
You said what? Alright, sticker that time. Alright, yeah, good shit, good shit, good shit.
Yeah. We then used only the best of manufacturing methods to attach the hairdryer to the end of the pipe.
Hey, it's working, boy. Yeah.
I smell something though. It's kind of making me.
With the furnace complete, we decided it was time to go ahead and preheat the crucible.
Hey, give me the vegetable oil.
Oh my god.
We then used a very weak drill to drill holes in the furnace lid as to allow for air outflow. To make the sand for the sand casting molds, we mixed sand with very fine, natural kitty litter.
Why do
we keep leaving the fire on the tin?
We then began the process of filling the frames with sand. We used a thin layer of baby powder to help make sure that the sand did not stick to the plywood that it was resting on.
Okay, wait. I don't want to dump all of it in there yet.
Hey, hold on. Dr. Dave.
Aye, Captain.
We made sure to add baby powder to the hammer too, to make it a bit easier to remove the hammer from its cavity within the mold. In the last step of this process, we added baby powder to the parting plane of the sandcasting mold in order to make it easier to separate the two halves.
Open the door, open the door, open the door.
Run!
Ooh! That's hot.
I'll hold it.
We used empty beer bottles to create the riser and the feeder for the mold.
I think he would give us 100.
Oh, legit production.
Mine's holding on quite a bit.
Just I can believe I whole ass forgot. I'm like, take it out quick.
Take it out, take it out.
Oh, that's terrible. You want to fix it real quick?
Yeah, Steven.
Oh, Wally.
Although we spent so much time making this glorious mold, it turns out that it wouldn't quite work out for us because the sand kept collapsing under its own weight and wouldn't hold a good shape for the mold.
That in the video too. There ain't no bit.
Okay, just go. Are you going?
As to solve the sand collapsing problem of the previous mold, we decided just to insert the hammer vertically and see how it went. Turns out that this actually created a pretty good shape, and this is what we ended up using as the final mold for the project.
Hurry. What's good?
In a moment of pure bliss, everything worked out perfectly. We were able to pour our aluminum without problem, and we actually obtained a reasonably hammer-shaped object from our mold. This was all we could have asked for.
You getting them good views?
How much was it?
Yes, sir.
30 racks.